Okay, hey guys, I'm gonna give this a shot. I already feel super awkward, so really sorry if it looks as awkward as it feels, but I'm gonna go through all the notes that we've gone over so far and all the things that you need to know for your quiz, which is tomorrow. So if you were absent, if you don't remember, or if you just weren't paying attention, then I'd love for you to watch this so that you can know what you missed. All right, so evolution, this whole unit is on evolution. And evolution is changes in groups of organisms over time. And so we'll talk about all the ways that a population can change, how that happens, and what we know now. But we're going to start with how we figured all of that out. So we're going to talk about some people. The first one is James Hutton. He was a geologist, and he is known for the theory of uniformity. Basically, he says that the Earth has always experienced the same forces. So when we're doing our research now, we can go ahead and take into account that the plate tectonics have always been moving and that gravity has always been acting upon the Earth. So that's what the theory of uniformity is. Uniform, something stays the same or looks the same. So pretty much these forces have always been and probably always will be occurring. Before Hutton, the Earth was believed to be 6,000 years old. After Hutton's research that he did, it supported that the Earth was 4.6 billion years old. So these are the important parts to know, is his theory of uniformity, and his research supported that the Earth was 4.6 billion years old. Next is Malthus. He is the guy who basically said there is competition. So he observed all these animals and plants and saw that they're reproducing at such a high rate, but there's only this many resources and only this many can survive. So if there's limited resources and more organisms than there are resources for, obviously they're gonna have to fight for stuff. So he saw that competition was being created within a species. Lamarck was the first to develop a theory of evolution, and it was called the theory of inheritance of acquired characteristics. Remember, this is a lot of big words, but if you break it down, you already know what all of them mean. So inheritance, we know what inheritance means. It's passed down from your parents. Acquired means you got it, you acquired it. And then characteristics, so we're just talking about all these traits that can be passed down, basically. So his theory, he said organisms developed modifications to meet environmental challenges. And this will make sense a little bit more with our picture that's coming next. But selective use would alter the size and shape of the structure passed on to the offspring. So if we look at our giraffe here, we see that this giraffe started like this. Well, he needs to get up to the tall trees to get all of those leaves that are up there. So he kept stretching and kept stretching and kept stretching, and eventually his neck was long. Well, his theory basically said that long-necked giraffes were short-necked giraffes that strained to reach higher branches and that they would grow longer necks. He said that this trait would be passed down. So if the giraffe stretched and stretched and stretched and now has a long neck, do we think that it's going to pass down the long neck to its offspring? No, right? Because its genes coded for the short neck. Just because you change something physically doesn't mean that that trait will be passed down. That's like having plastic surgery or changing your body in some way, working out a ton, and then you expect your offspring to have whatever trait it is that you changed. So we know now that that's not the case and that this isn't necessarily true. But that's kind of how research goes. You create a theory, and then as more research is available and completed, then things change and are modified. So we have Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace. These guys are the fathers of evolutionary biology. And Alfred Wallace, he is a naturalist. He had a similar theory to Darwin's. And so he wrote this essay and sent it to Darwin, and that essay is really what motivated Darwin to go ahead and publish his book, which is what he's known for, On the Origin of Species. So yeah, without Wallace, it might have taken longer or something, but he kind of motivated, and they ended up becoming friends and kind of like collabing, and you know. So then we have Charles Darwin. He's known as the father of evolution, so he gets the official title, Father of Evolution. He sailed on the HMS Beagle, and while he was sailing, he just took notes. He recorded everything, made all these observations, And specifically the Galapagos Islands, when he got there and he saw that, like, oh my gosh, there is so much diversity. There's birds with this color and this color and this pattern and this pattern, and tortoises with this long neck and this length neck, and all of these differences. Why do we need so much variety, and how did that occur? So all of that diversity is really what motivated him, and eventually he created the theory of evolution by natural selection. We're going to talk about what natural selection means, but in summary, the strongest or the best fit and most favorable traits are going to be the ones that are passed on to the next generation. Sorry, the bell's ringing. Okay. So then we have the voyage of the Beagle. So a 5-year voyage began in 1833. He was only on the Galapagos Islands for 5 weeks, which is kind of crazy. It seems like a really short time when pretty much all of his research and his book and theory and all of that are based on these islands. But he saw variants of organisms on the different islands. So he saw the finches with the different beaks. He saw the tortoises with their different neck lengths. So here's some. You can see how the beaks are different shapes. So you do need to know what this image means. Basically, we start in the middle here. We can see our ancestral seed-eating ground finch. But as the children, well, I keep calling them children, but as the offspring are had, they move out and into different habitats and environments.
Nathan Valley to the attendance office, please. Nathan Valley to attendance. Thank you.
Okay, and so we can see that these are the finches that are eating mainly insects. These are the ones that are eating mainly seeds, cactus parts and seeds, and buds and fruits. And if we look at their beak shapes, they're all different based on what food source they need to eat. So if I am a finch and I have to get into a really small space to get my food, my beak may need to be pointier or smaller, as opposed to something that needs to eat something a little larger, where their beak also needs to be larger. So the diversity that Darwin and Wallace observed reinforced what was becoming commonly accepted in the scientific community, basically that species are not the same. We don't just have 10, we're going to have 10 forever. Things are changing, evolving, and that is evolution. So we could end up with way more species later on than we have now, way more diversity as this continues to happen. So evolution is the gradual diversification of species, change over time. Things are changing and evolving over time. And then natural selection, mechanisms by which evolution takes place. So the more favorable trait that the organism has, they're able to survive whatever condition, and then they're able to reproduce more. Darwin referred to this process as descent with modification. So as more organisms have offspring and we go down that family tree, things are being modified based on what is more favorable. The endosymbiotic theory, pretty simple. When you think of the word endo, inside, and then symbiotic, things are mutually beneficial for both of the organisms. So basically one prokaryote that's larger engulfed another prokaryote that was smaller, and instead of eating it, it kind of just let it live inside. So then you had a large prokaryote with a small prokaryote inside. And eventually the smaller organism became the chloroplast or the mitochondria or whatever. And so we can see here, started with two independent, one engulfs the other, now it lives inside. The arrangement is mutually beneficial for both, which is the reason that this would occur. And then as the internal bacteria are passed on, this is living inside and it's the same, so it's passed on from generation to generation. All right, so support for evolution, we have the fossil record, comparative anatomy, comparative embryology, and comparative biochemistry, and geographic distribution. So this is the last thing that we'll need to know for our quiz, so we're almost done. Our fossil record offers some of the most significant evidence of evolutionary change. So this is going to be what determines the ancestry of organisms. So we're going to look back at these fossils, and somebody somewhere is making very large charts and recording a whole lot of data, or data. I always get yelled at for saying data. So yeah, so this is going to be the thing that determines the ancestry of organisms. So the Archaeopteryx, I always have to think about that before I say it, is the earliest known bird. The thing that's weird about this bird is that it had reptilian and bird characteristics. It was only 50 centimeters from wingtip to wingtip, But you look here and you can see this is a bird characteristic, this is a reptile characteristics. So it's kind of like the mix in between those two, reptile and bird. And then you can see, we look at this graph here. I don't know if this is actually a graph, diagram, something, I don't know. So this is 52 million years ago, and it had a full pelvis and femur adapted for land. Then we look here, full pelvis and femur adapted for swimming. And then as we move down, and we're at 38 million years here, now we have a tiny pelvis and femur, and then we have a vestigial pelvis and femur. So as we move down, things have changed a little bit. Transitional fossils indicate gradual change in the fossil record. So things didn't just change and now we have this and we had this. It's over time, things are changing over time. And as you can see, started with full pelvis and now we just have this vestigial pelvis. Comparative anatomy, homologous structures are going to have the same structure, different function. Homologous, homo means same, so we're talking about structure, so same structure. So that pretty much gives away our definition here, same structure, different function. And if they have the same structure, they are going to be inherited from a common ancestor. So you can see our picture here, they have the same structure, but we know that a bat uses his structure to fly and a human uses theirs to do all kinds of other stuff. Then we have our analogous structures. Ana, different, so different structure, same function. If they do not have the same structure, they are not inherited from a common ancestor. And so you can see here, we have a different structure, but they're all wings and they're all used to fly. Vestigial structures, this is reduced forms of functional structures. So just like we saw in our pelvis, it's something that was full-blown pelvis used for land, and then it was kind of just a vestigial, smaller, reduced form of that. Comparative embryology shows evolutionary relationships. So we look here at all these, you probably think look exactly the same because they kind of do. But as we move down to our next stage and next stage, we can see that this turns into a fish, this turns into a human, a chick, and so it's showing that how similar they look in those early stages can maybe show some relationships between those. Comparative biochemistry, my favorite thing, DNA. So more similar DNA, more similar the organism. If we compare here and you see these lice, and we have a human, gorilla, and chimpanzee. Then we go to the next one, glue, hiss, and LSO, and lice. So we are seeing that the human and the chimpanzee would be the most similar out of these two things. And then we see the horse and the zebra are lice, hiss, and then their last amino acid is different. So we can see the similarities, and so the more different that they are, the more different that their DNA is, the more different that the organism will be. And then the last one, geographic distribution. Animals that live close together are more closely related than those that are geographically separated. So if they're living in the same environment, they're probably having similar traits because they're feeding on the same resources. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions.